Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Mythicast. I'm your host Spencer. It's been a week, I missed y'all, and I'm joined by a special guest. A man who knows his way around the top 10 Mythic slots on MTG Arena. Jim, how's it going today?
What's going on, Spencer? Glad to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out, man. We had conversed back and forth a while back, and I had some huge life changes come up, and you actually took the initiative to send me an updated list and say you still really wanted to talk about it. I love that kind of stuff. I love people that are passionate about the decks that they're playing and what they're doing.
It's good stuff.
And you seem to really like this one.
Yeah, people need to know about this. This is the best deck in Standard no one's playing.
Yeah. If you want to play the deck today that we're going to talk about, you don't forget to check out our sponsor over at puremtgo.com. Check out their articles and their sponsor at MTGO Traders. With that being said, as I said before, we're waiting a little bit till COVID break goes, a little more under control before we launch that Patreon. But if you're looking for Magic coaching, send me a DM. I am looking for people to kind of do beta coaching with before the Patreon launches. And I'm looking for about 2 more people. So, with that being said, Jim, let's talk about you really quick. Why don't you tell the listeners kind of who you are, where you're from, the whole Backstreet Boys shenanigans here. Tell them a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into Magic and your love for the ladder and what deck we're going to talk about today.
Sure, let's do that. So I'm Jim Dyke from the New Hampshire area. So I'm a New England Magic player, old school Magic player. Been playing Magic since the dark. So it's like over 25 years ago. Played fairly competitively for a decent streak there. Played on the Pro Tour, I don't know the exact number of times, but 7-8 times into the Pro Tour, a number of U.S. Nationals invites, Grand Prix top 8, yada, yada, yada. But first and foremost, I'm a husband, a father, so that's my priority. I work full time. Right now, Magic is just an awesome way for me to unwind. And I love what they've done with Arena. Kind of got back into the game, specifically Arena, I think like 7 or 8 months ago. So I wouldn't say a break. Magic has always been a big part of my life. But Arena's been a great way for a busy schedule to pick up a deck, pick up a game, and just run it and then move on with your day, right? So I really like that. Probably the last few months I got into streaming, just, again, as a way just to connect with friends, like-minded folks who like to play this awesome game. And, it's just been a really good experience for me so far.
Jim, talk to me about the parenting aspect as somebody who also has qualified for the Pro Tour and done a lot of similar things. As a parent, one of the reasons that I like Arena right now is just like I can play on my schedule and stuff like that. But was parenting the reason that you took the break?
I mean, do we ever take breaks from Magic, really? Like, it's always kind of like, I've been playing since I was in 6th grade, right? So it's been a huge part of my life. And any of you longtime Magic players, you go through peaks and valleys, right? Where you're playing a lot, maybe you qualified for something, so you ramp up, right? And then, after that crummy string of tournaments, you're like, screw this, I'm never playing Magic again, and you stop for a while. But there's always that bug that comes back. But all my friends are like Magic friends. They all play. We'll get together, we'll do cube drafts and all the casual stuff. But for me personally, like, a big part of what I like about the game is the competitive aspect, right? I'm a competitive guy. I'm into that stuff. So was it parenting that had me take a break? No, I'd say growing up, So
Darn it,
it's just a
growing up.
function of time. I know. But here's the thing though. Arena makes it so I don't have to do all that. I can still squeeze it in. I can still do this stuff and
Right.
play at a pretty high level.
And do you find the ladder system something that you kind of love about Arena? Being able to just jump in and get that competitive spirit flowing
Yeah,
without having to go out to a Grand Prix or without having
for
to travel
sure.
for a Pro Tour or
Yeah.
an SCG. Is ladder kind of filling that for you?
It is absolutely like the competitive nature, the fact that I'm playing against very good opponents each and every time, and I can compete with myself, right? Like, oh well, right now, as of this morning, I was like 19th on the constructed ladder. Well, that means there's 18 more people to pass, right?
Right.
So
So talk to me about that. That's a really positive mindset. And before we get into the deck, I know a lot
yeah,
of people, including myself, I actually don't play ladder right now outside of draft. Like draft ladder is the only way that I consume the ladder on Arena, just because I know that my guests are going to be like you, and they're going to compete in that constructed ladder, and they're going to have that knowledge. So I'm usually just grinding to get the gold right now. How do you keep that positive mindset? Let's say that you hit diamond, and after this insane run that you go through all the way through platinum, and you hit that moment where it's like you're 21 and 2, and all of a
yeah.
sudden you're like, oh well, just lost 5 in a row. And how do you keep from being disheartened? I mean, you talked about, I think, the key, right, which is competing with yourself, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, for me personally, like it, it's all part of it. You have to take a step back, right? Magic fundamentally is a 50-50 game, right? One player is going to win, one player is going to lose. So on average, you should win half of your matches. And that's just if you stick it with coin flips. What makes Magic awesome is you get to play around with those odds. You get to pick your deck, you get to build it and design it how you will. You try to outplay and get little extra lines against your opponent. It's this constant churn. When I go on some of the downswings, sometimes I will take a step back and just think through what am I losing to? What are the patterns? Like try to analyze the data and stuff. That helps me. I also find I do my best innovation during a downswing. When I'm on a really bad losing streak is when I start to innovate the deck list or start looking elsewhere or start to get a little bit antsy. And that's really when I've been able to push decks further, right? What we're going to talk about here today, this red-black sack deck with the companion no one plays, I don't even know how to say it. Giganta? Is that right?
I
Gigantha?
believe that Giganta is how you say it.
Gigantha. Yeah. See, but no one plays this thing. Every time I go to a match, you see the little white highlight. Everyone's looking at it, reading it. What is this? They don't know what we're playing. But some of the innovations that we've done here has been during a downswing.
So,
So
so talk to me kind of before we get into the deck. I want to
yeah.
talk about your journey to Mythic. What rank did you actually end up achieving? Like, what's the highest point you've gotten with this deck specifically?
Well, I mean, this month, so month of May, I peaked at 7th. I've gone as high as 2nd with red black. So yeah, they reset it every month, as everyone knows. So I'm a perpetual, like I'm in Mythic. Every month I'm qualifying for whatever it is, the MCQ or the Mythic Point Challenge. So we're always in that top 1200 area, for the 7 or 8 months that I've started with Mythic or with Arena rather. So I mean, typically you can find us kind of bopping around in the top 100, but peak number 2. Haven't hit number 1 yet.
What have you been playing against in the ladder? Also in your journey, like, did you find that Platinum and Diamond were any different than Mythic? I typically find that from Platinum up, it's usually a pretty similar meta game. Is that kind of what you experienced?
For the most part, I mean, Platinum can be a tough area to get out of, especially early in the season, right? Like
Yeah,
all the Mythic players are like, you restart the month in Platinum. So you're playing a bunch of Platinum folks. If you didn't start in Platinum and you're able to race up to Platinum, suddenly you're surrounded and playing a bunch of, people who are playing their deck very well. They're playing good lists. They were Mythic last month. But from a metagame perspective, I mean, I usually from Platinum to Mythic each month, it's usually been pretty quick. So I don't get a huge pulse. It feels about the same to me though. Like not there's not too many differences because usually when I'm playing Platinum, it's at the beginning of the month, which is most of all the same Mythic players that you'll get paired against later in the month.
So talk to me about the ladder
Yeah.
right now. Is it
Sure.
Is it mostly, are you seeing, Teamerek, Mono Red, and Jeskai, or is there other things that you're seeing a lot of?
Yeah, it's primarily, I mean, the Yorion decks, right? Like they're the deck to beat. They're the Goliath right now. So Yorion, Luca, the Jeskai Luca decks, arguably they're the most powerful deck in the format right now. Teamerek is very present in the Mythic levels right now. You'll run across the cycling decks, which I think are waning down a little bit. The mono red decks have been trending up. So whether that's mono red Obosh or just kind of a more traditional mono red, those have been coming up quite a bit. But I mean that's really what you should expect to play.
Awesome. I'm actually going to pull up the deck just so
Sure.
the listeners can get a view if they're watching over on YouTube. But you have some restrictions here because you are playing a companion. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about kind of Giganta before before I asked this question. So you're restricted on kind of the CMC of your cards. You can't play a double red or double black spell in this deck. Did that restrict you in any way in making any changes to the deck as you were trying to kind of look into what cards you might want to include in your sideboard or in your main deck as you're climbing the ladder?
So awesome question. The answer is no, like not at all. So I mentioned I do some streaming and I've been playing Black Red for a while, and one of the viewers kind of was like, I think you have a companion that has no restriction for your list. Maybe you want to play this dorky 5/5 as an 8th card. Like there's no downside. So right. I mean, from a deck building perspective, no, it's influenced none of my decisions. None of the cards that I've even considered have been double red or double black.
Have there been changes, though, that you have made as you've been streaming and as you've been climbing Mythic?
Sure. Yeah, and a lot of it is kind of bouncing between what cards will be in the sideboard versus the main. Nice. So I think, so I don't know if you've put the list up for the YouTube viewers yet. I don't want to dive into individual cards.
It's up there. It's up there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I would say the most recent innovation, if you will, and keep in mind this is Red-Black Sac. It's been a staple in Standard for quite some time, right? So you'll notice like a lot of the normal players in Red-Black are here. So you got your Cat Oven Engine, you've got your Mayhem Devil, you got Priest of Forgotten Gods, you've the Woe Strider. You have the core Black-Red package that has kind of proven in Standard to be a strong player. Right. What changed with Ikoria's release has been a lot of the Yorion decks. Very powerful decks. So one staple that had been within the I guess the older red-black decks have been Claim the Firstborn. Like they all play for Claim the Firstborn main deck, right? So I kind of recognize that, you know what, I'm playing against Teamerek, Yorion Luca, Bantramp. Like I'm playing against all these big, control, powerful decks. I don't really want Claim the Firstborn main deck. So we moved into the sideboard. We brought in Heartfire, which is a spicy card that no one plays around. We brought in Drillbit for a little extra disruption. And it really helps our overall game plan against any of the Yorion decks or Teamerek, really.
Nice. Yeah, I think we should probably move on to talk about the deck. I'll read the list off.
Sure.
Listening at home rather than watching. Our companion we've already mentioned, but we have 4 Cauldron Familiar, 4 Gutter Bones, 4 Dreadhorde Butcher, 4 Priest of the Forgotten Gods, 4 Robber of the Rich, 4 Mayhem Devil, 4 Royal Strider, 2 Heartfire, 3 Drillbit, 4 Witch's Oven, and 23 lands with 2 Castle Locktwain and 4 Fabled Passage. No Scryland here. I think that's pretty easy considering you've got the Fabled Passage. You can't really afford that many tap lands. Our sideboard for the 14 cards remaining are the 4 Claim the Firstborns, 1 Duress, 1 Drillbit, 3 Heartless Act, 2 Act of Treason, and 3 Rotting Regisaur.
Yeah.
So, so one of the big questions that I have for you, Jim, is what are the? I mean, you kind of talked about the engine. You kind of talked about the things that Red Black has already proven. What do you think the key cards for this list are?
I mean, it's going to be the core Red Black cards, right? Like the Red Black engine is a big thing. What has been working for me lately in the metagame, I know I just hinted at it, but the Heartfires and Drillbits are making a world of difference in this metagame of Yorions, Reclamation, and kind of slower value-driven decks, right? So I have a pretty specific formula when I'm playing against these Yorion decks. If you don't mind, I'll dive into that real quick. But like when I'm like assessing your opening hand, right? You really have 3 pieces of this deck. And the reason why this deck has been so successful, not just this build, but all Red-Black builds, is you can put forward an aggressive foot. Sometimes the aggressive foot will roll over your opponent. But what Red-Black decks have been able to do is they also have reach with Cat, with Oven. Difficult to deal with reach. Cat, Oven, you play a Mayhem Devil and suddenly you have an extra 3 points of damage kind of out of nowhere. You have some of, Woe Strider comes back from the graveyard, escapes from the graveyard. You have some of this extra reach that you don't usually find in traditional aggressive decks. So when I'm playing against these Yorion decks, if you just have an aggressive start, an aggressive opener, you're probably not going to win the game. You'll win some of them, but you're not going to win all those games, right? So it's probably favored for the Yorion Luca decks or the Bant Ramp decks or even Temur Rec if all you have is aggression, okay? But you have those other 2 components of your deck. The reach component, and when I say reach, I mean Cat Oven, Heartfire is a way to get some reach, right? And then you also have the disruption piece of your deck, Drillbit. There's only 3 in the main deck, right? You board up to 4, you bring in a Duress post board, but the disruption piece of the plan is really important too. So when I'm assessing an opening hand against one of these Yorion decks, that's what I'm looking for. Not all 3. I'm looking for 2 of the 3. Aggression plus disruption, or aggression plus reach, right? And then the games that you get all 3, you kind of just roll them over, right? So, right, and those
games just snowball out of control almost all the time.
Right. And it's kind of cool because, you do kind of mulligan aggressively with this deck. And sometimes you do have to say, well, I hope they can't deal with a Gutterbones into Dreadhorde Butcher, right? And sometimes they can't, right? But you pair that with reach, you pair that with, yeah.
It's just something that always surprises me. Every time it hits the board and I'm not prepared, I'm like, I'm going to lose this. Like, there's no way I'm going to beat this.
Yeah, it snowballs for sure.
Jim, talk to me. I mean, you're talking about your game plan, which is so helpful for these listeners. What do you think the kind of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck are? You've already kind of mentioned one that, the format has already, and it might be because of the, the mono red deck, Embercleave just existing as a card, that decks were just forced to be prepared for aggro decks to kind of start this format. So talk to me kind of about like what are the strengths and weaknesses of this deck?
Sure. So it's funny because so far I've talked about our approach to these control and big value decks, right? But one of the strengths of this particular deck, beyond it, like I think this has a good matchup against like a lot of the decks in the format, right? Beyond being a good metagame deck, this type of deck feasts on other aggressive decks in the format, right? So as you see mono red starting to trend up, like I I've been sporting a ridiculous, like between 80 and 90% win rate against any form of mono red, whether it's Embercleave, whether it's Obosh, it doesn't really matter, right? The creature decks really have trouble dealing with Cat Oven. Eventually you get Mayhem Devil. Priest of the Forgotten Gods needs to die the turn it comes out, or they will probably lose, right? And you have all this inevitability baked into this aggressive shell, right? Like you look at a card like Dreadhorde Butcher, and you say, wow, that's probably really good against the control decks. It has haste, it gets bigger, it probably gives them fits. Well, guess what? Mono red does not like that card either. You play it, it's a 2-for-1 card. What are they going to do? Shock it? And you pick up a 1/1, right? Sometimes you just play Dreadhorde Butcher and say go. And it's like, what do? Attack into it and you get a 2-for-1? Right. So it gives these creature decks nightmares.
One thing that we kind of mentioned as I was reading off the deck, but I'm curious. This mana is interesting in that you have 8 duels, you have 23 lands, but one of your lands is really important later in the game, and it's not a land that would be that typically important in Fabled Passage. What is that? Is that land? When you have that, I mean, how hard are you holding that land, waiting for a Mayhem Devil?
So the answer is almost all the time. If you can, you'll keep it. You'll save it for Mayhem Devil. And certain matchups matter more than others, right? We talk about the mono red deck, like the fact that maybe you can play a devil on turn 4 and immediately get some value by cracking a passage. Like you want to maximize the instances that can happen, right? That said, your land is just like every deck, but it's really important for you to stage your land appropriately, right? If your opener has 3 land and 1 is a Fable Passage, you should probably lead with the Fable Passage to ensure that you're going to be able to play your turn 3 drop, right? So you kind of have to be able to play the games out in your head, but usually later in the game, if you have a choice, crack or not, usually you're not cracking.
Sure. Talk to me about kind of what do you think like the coolest interaction in this deck is? What is the thing that every time you do it, you're just like, yeah, that was a good time?
I mean, there's a lot. Like, I mean, this is an aggressive deck, going aggressive, but then you have like all these mini combos that are just annoying. Like Cat Alvin is always fun, but I think the ones that people miss. So the ones that people miss that are really fun. First, no one plays around Heartfire, so that's great. Anytime you Heartfire someone out, it feels good. But I would say like Priest of the Forgotten Gods. That on its own is fun, but there are many situations, and this is a tricky deck to play. There are a lot of tricky lines, and the game state can evolve into this really complicated state where it's really tough to find the right path forward. One of the things I seem to look out for more than other red-black players, you can target yourself with Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Okay? It's not intuitive, right? But you can target your opponent and you can target yourself. You will have to sacrifice a creature. You will lose 2 life. But you know what? Sometimes targeting yourself for that extra point of Mayhem Devil damage makes all the difference in the world, right? So that's a cool little interaction. Every time I get some value out of targeting myself with Priest, it feels pretty cool.
That's spicy. Your opponents probably are like on that, so you sacrifice a creature, lose 2 life, and like ping their Planeswalker. That's got to be the spiciness.
It's I mean the deck has claimed the Firstborn in the sideboard and Act of Treason, so you have these threatened abilities. So sometimes your opponent has a Priest, and you don't have a Witch's Oven. Right? Or a Woe Strider. Well, who cares? Steal their Priest, activate it, target yourself, sack their own Priest. Go. The amount of times my opponents will steal my Priest to activate it, and then I get it back, what is happening? Why are you doing this? No one knows you can do it. It's madness.
Is it other creature? Can you not sacrifice the Priest to itself?
Yes, you can sacrifice the Priest to yourself. To itself. That's the key.
Yeah, okay. I was like, you should never give the Priest back.
You should never get the Priest back. And yet, here we are.
Sure.
there's also something rewarding about Robber of the Rich, right? Like a lot of these decks are slow. They're 3 colors. They're all playing Scrylands. There's just something satisfying about seeing them play a Scryland, put it on top, and you follow up with a Rob of the Rich. That always feels nice.
So let's talk about the sideboard really quick. I mean, we've kind
Sure.
of talked about you really like your aggro matchups. You've got a plan for kind of these Jeskai Luca decks, these Team Erect decks, and these Bant decks.
Yeah.
What your sideboard has 4 Claim the Firstborn and 2 Active Treason. It's got 3 Heartless Act. It's got 2 more discard spells and 3 Riding Registrar. You clearly have very dedicated sideboard plans.
Yeah.
For this deck. Why don't you kind of talk about them for a minute?
Yeah, they really break down into a couple different spots, right? So the reason why we're main decking Drill Bit and Heartfire, we talked about those control decks. But the fact that we already have a deck that tends to perform well against the other aggressive decks in the format, you can make a sacrifice like that. You can play these cards that are kind of mediocre in an aggro match. So post board, you get to take out Drill Bit, you get to take out Heartfire. Like against the mono red, you get to take out Gutter Bones, right? A 2/1, it doesn't block well, it's not doing a lot for you. And you kind of turn into this aggressive control deck. And I say aggressive control deck because your Claim the Firstborn and Act of Treason act as removal, but you also get to attack. And it snowballs. And then obviously Heartless Act against the creature decks is going to be great. And then the other side of the coin, against the control decks, you're already kind of pre-sideboarded a little bit because you got your Drill Bit and Heartfire. You bring in a couple more. Remember I said you want aggression, disruption, aggression, reach. So you're bringing in more of the disruption in Duress and Drill Bit. Rotting Regisaur is going to be against those decks that try to use red spells to kill you. So if they're sweeping your board with like Clarions or Storm's Wrath, right? So against Temur Reclamation, you bring in Reggie. It's a X6. Like dealing 6 points of damage is really tough for those slower control decks that are killing your creatures and interacting with red spells.
Was there any thought to actually having Embercleave in your sideboard for Rotting Regisaur, and then maybe just not having a companion in that matchup?
I'd say no. And part of the reason why I wouldn't is when you're playing against like a Temur Reclamation deck or maybe some of the Fires decks, like the traditional Jeskai Fires type decks that the Regisaur is good against, their game is about controlling your board state. So they want to like 1-for-1 you early game. They want to sweep your board. So sometimes you'll find yourself in a position where you really only have 1 or 2 threats on the board at any given time, and Embercleave can be really difficult to cast at that stage.
Sure, that makes sense.
So Reggie kind of does the job on its own.
Sure, you just kind of don't need that extra push. That makes sense to me. Let's kind of talk about
Sure.
Some matchup stuff. We've actually I think we've kind of hit on some of the big stuff, but is there anything? I mean, I agree with you. I played cycling at the challenge this weekend for my stream, and I was not excited about it because I posted a poll on Twitter and I was like, what do people want me to play? That's what they wanted, and I was like, I don't think this deck is very good right now.
Yeah.
So you think that deck's on the decline, but you think mono red's kind of on the upswing? Is there any thoughts to maybe some of the Gruul decks or Temur Adventures or Temur Elementals with this deck?
I mean, I've played against them. The Gruul decks, there's a couple different flavors of Gruul decks that I've seen. So kind of the more traditional Gruul deck where they're kind of coming at you hard and fast. It's just an aggro deck. They're bigger creatures. But I'm usually pretty comfortable in a matchup like that. You bring in Heartless Act, you bring in Act of Treason, it's all that stuff. The Gruul Fires decks, on the other hand, those can present a little bit different of a challenge, right? Where they're able to kind of ramp out and get these huge creatures that are just a lot more difficult for us to deal with. They're outside of the range of Claim the Firstborn. I can't claim the Firstborn to kill them. They're big 6/5 Cavalier. Those can be problematic.
Okay. And the the Teamer Elementals deck, other than the fact that you've got the,
Yeah,
this is the deck that, by the way, that I've played the most in this
sure.
tournament right now. Other than the fact that Risen Reef is, a 1/1, do things
Those are
like
fun.
do things like Cavalier of Thorns and Omnath kind of slow you down?
I mean, they can. I'd be happy to play against kind of Teamer Elementals often because at least like post board, I'm going to bring in Claim the Firstborn to take care of all the O3s.
Sure.
Like it really can screw them up. Just a single claim really can just
Killing
yeah.
the leaf game.
Yep, and then you want to save Heartless Act and Heart of Treason for the cards you mentioned, right? The 5 casting cost, Cavalier of Thorns, like the bigger creatures. Risen Reef, yeah, you want it to die pretty much on site, but you have a lot of almost free, like, I mean, Devil is a free way to kill Risen Reef, right? Dreadhorde Butcher is a free way to kill Risen Reef. You can steal it with Claim the Firstborn, and so those little creatures I don't really care about. You're going to lose those games if usually you're losing to the big fatties,
Sure.
right? So try to, like, I always try to keep back a Heartless Act or an Act of Treason. Like, by the way, Act of Treason on Cavalier of Thorns, sack it, put my Act of Treason on top, go. Good luck, friend.
Sure.
Like, that's a pretty sick combo.
I assume you kind of dumpster on Teamer Adventures. Like, I assume that's one of your best matchups.
Yeah, historically it always has been for Red Black. Yep.
Cool. Well, is there anything? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to listeners. You would continue to play this deck moving forward. You think this is, a great choice in the metagame right now. Is there anything else you want to kind of add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about how great this deck is. I do think it's one of the best decks in Standard right now. It may be because it's just a good metagame deck right now. I think it's positioned well. It's a tricky deck to play. If you pick up this deck for the first time, there's going to be a learning curve. And it's hard to articulate until you actually get into it and play. I have been sharing like all these good matchups and how you have a plan against all the matchups. And any deck you pick up, you should have a plan for all the matchups, right? But there are matchups that I really don't want to play against. There are Esper decks where the removals are like Glass Caskets and Cry of, I'm really bad with card names, Cry of Contamination, or the one that exiles. Yes, that. Like all their removal exiles, like sometimes decks like that you don't really want to deal with. Some of the traditional blue-white control decks can be tough if they really load up on the early drops, right? So the Sorcery Speed Decree that exiles a red or black creature, the Glass Caskets coupled with, their White Saga there, to fairies, like those can be tough matchups. If they want to bring in Archon of Sun's Grace, that's tough. Another problem card for this deck is Nightpack Ambusher. Right, so a lot of the Teamer Reclamation decks will bring that in, and it's awkward for you because you kind of have to have a plan for it. But if they don't have it, you're diluting your deck. So do you bring in like one Heartless Act? So I mean that's part of, like, Heartfire kind of plays a little bit of a role there, where Heartfire gives you some reach, but it's also a little bit of an out to an ambusher. So anyways, I wanted to do some due diligence and it's not all rainbows. It's just mostly rainbows.
Sure. Makes sense. Well, Jim, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you. This was really fun for me. And I just want to give you a minute. I want you to kind of talk about your stream, talk about you. Where can people find you? Where can people, if they have questions about this deck, if they want to jump into your stream and see you rocking in those high mythic ranks, where can they do that?
Yeah. So I mean, it's twitch.tv / my handle, JimmyD1717. Really, really easy to find. We have a small stream. It's not wildly popular, but I do like kind of the intimate setting of the stream where I get to interact with all the folks that are watching, all the viewers. Ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. It's not a big deal. It's not, some of the busier streams that have just question, right? Like you can have a good conversation. And I'm also on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter, same handle, JimmyD1717. I'm pretty responsive on both platforms. So hit me up with any questions.
Awesome. Anything you want to shout out? Anybody you want to, plug?
I probably should have prepped for that, but I mean, the main folks, I mean, so some of my key friends that have been around since the beginning that helped me with this stuff and helped really evolve my Magic game. You know, Brian Sue has been a big part of that. Jeffrey Kirsch has been a big part of that. Christopher Roy has been a big part of that. Like these are folks that people probably haven't heard of. They're excellent Magic players in their own right. If you're from the New England region, you know that these are the folks you really don't want to play at that PTQ, right? So shout out to them for sure. And all the viewers, like, you know, I forget which one was like, hey man, you have a companion you can play. Like that came on stream live and was like, well, okay, put the companion in, and you know what? Guess what? A 5/5 matches up nicely against a 4/5 flyer in Yorion. So
Sure. Well, once again, thank you so much. You can find me at
Sure, man.
H. You can find the podcast at Arena Mythicast on Twitter. You can listen to us over on the constructicrism.com, YouTube, or on iTunes or any of your podcasting platforms, as well as the rest of the Constructed Criticism Network. Once again, Jim, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the listeners, and see everybody next week with another episode of Arena Mythicast.